So, if there's anything that can stand as the zeitgeist of nerdy fantasy media in the last decade or so, it's been the dark elder gods, the bleak, hopeless, dark ages worlds where demons are real, possession is real, cults live in the woods, dark elder gods live in the ether, witchcraft is abundant. Gone are the days of Tolkien and hope and Christian magic. And when that does exist, it's usually with a very devout Dark Ages religion view on reality, with exceptions like Pike from Critical Role, Vox Machina, but that's more of a modern neo Tolkienism. But no, what we look in most modern fantasy media is deep, deep religious trauma, deep, deep dark worlds full of evil creatures, twisted elder gods, a cold, uncaring world where people die and suffer and squalor. And I think there's a reason for that. I think gone are the days of hopeful Tolkien. Um, I mean, it still exists, but it's been transformed. That media still exists. But I think we really. It's kind of like how we don't have positive sci fi anymore. We don't have the enchantment we used to. We want something that feels more real, more alive, more historically accurate. In reality, you can actually tell better stories with that kind of like role play than you can get with any than you could ever get with Lord of the Rings, because you have heroes who actually are challenged to fight against black and white norms and fight for the little guy and help out the farmer and his daughter who are being plagued by demonic Slaneshi demons. You know? And maybe it's because we've also just how Tolkien was inspired by the doom of World War II to write that inspired him to write about Mordor. Maybe we've also been hurt by real life religion and real world, and we want to write something that's more human and grounded in a culture that's completely disenchanted with like hope when hope seems so lost. But I do think worlds like The Witcher and Warhammer can give us really good role playing experiences for nuanced games and people putting their faith in their friends and their family over organized religion, which I think is a huge advantage over Tolkien. We also see, and when we do see clerics like Pike, it really stands out. It's a very personal faith that people like that play. Or he can play as the struggling Sigmarite, priest of Sigmar with his warhammer, fighting for the child, but also hunting down the demon, the moral quandary. And once again, it's just historically real. We become more literate with history and religion in the last couple decades, and we've kind of want to pay more realistic fantasy because it's more like human. It's more real, and I enjoy that. The Dark Elder gods in Dragon Age and Warhammer just they represent some Lovecraftian vibes I really like. And you're dealing with demonically possessed creatures, twisted dark magic that's consuming the world and filling the world with dread and mutation. I love these stories. I love the power of chaos, the blight. This is Gothic. I love it, and the corruption that's consuming the world. You see that in Dark Souls too. One of the core themes in games like Dragon Age and Warhammer is you live in this blighted world, and when you're not fighting demons and darkspawn and dragons, you're fighting against literal hell dimensions, and but also the politics of court. And I like that. It's more real, and it shows like how it kind of starts the enchantment of the Tolkien Jesus freaks and shows us even in medieval worlds and fantasy worlds, politics still suck and they're a bunch of pricks with titles and like politics and and getting married to sue for peace. The Red Wedding. I mean, Game of Thrones did a really good job of showing how politics, no matter what world you're in, are always going to suck, and it's going to be full of narcissistic, sociopathic assholes. And I like that. It's realistic. But in the midst of all this darkness, it makes hope stand out even more. Hope not in institutions, but the brave fellowship of nerdy weirdos, the queer elf, the fuckboy gnome bard, and the group of very, very weird bisexual weirdos and their polyamorous relationship of the hobbits and the elf and the wizard who save the world from dark forces and the power of their love and their faith in their community and their higher beliefs, whether that be the Everlight, the Maker. It gives them hope to fight for something better, to build a better world, even amidst all this darkness in which religion, politics, and even the gods themselves are cursing it. But yeah, if you look throughout Dragon Age, is a dark fantasy adventure game that's a huge commentary on social structures, um, trauma. I mean, you get to fuck a bisexual nun who, by the third game, can become the pope of their religion. They do a lot of dialogue on gender norms, and Dragon Age was really good at deconstructing gender norms. It was an alternate role playing game. And you're faced with demons, darkspawn, and a dark fantasy world where if you have magical powers, you're burnt to the stake or you're turned into a slave of the church. Dragon Age was just a very dystopian Dark Ages world, and I really come to enjoy that kind of fantasy setting in my 20s and the last decade, really. I mean, the dragons, the darkspawn. I even like Veilguard. Crucify Me Only One. I enjoy it. I'll be doing a review of that pretty soon, a let's play of it. No, but Dragon Age Origins is the best of the series, and honestly, it's a dark fantasy world where emotion and dreaming creates an ether. Yes, I know they ripped off from Warhammer, which ripped off from Aleister Crowley, but these fantasy worlds created a vast cosmic level of horror with elder gods, fantasy elements like magic, but the magic was often a curse. It wasn't some Harry Potter stuff shit. It was you're a freak and an outcast if you have magic, and you're forced to be a slave of the church or be hunted down or be possessed by demons. Same thing with Warhammer. And in these grimdark universes, yeah, hope is hard to find. And morality is hard. But sometimes you gotta fight the good fight and do what rise above the darkness of the world and bring hope and joy and love into people's lives and make people better leaving them than when you found them. Which is a great metaphor for life. Dragon Age was really good. It was boundary pushing and still one of my favorite role playing games to this day. Yeah, the dark elder aspects of fantasy I've seen The Witcher, even Skyrim with like cults, no, like very non-theistic gods, elder things, pagan aspects of religion and magic, with it being a curse or a pact you make to improve your life in a very fucked up, dark, dystopian world. I mean, the Imperium is such a dystopian world, or the Empire Man. Is it no wonder people sell their souls to Zeech or Slaanesh to improve their standing in life and have more happiness? And that they're doing a huge commentary on the religion of oppressive order and a religion with dark demonic gods, which represent the ether and chaos. And yeah, you sell your souls to them, and you make pacts with these deities, whether they be the Daedra gods, the chaos gods. But you know what? In this fantasy world, you make boons, you make deals, which is how paganism worked. And I know pagan gods were not, they weren't the dark, diabolical things a lot of Christians made them out to be, but they weren't like the theistic Valor either. But then again, I do enjoy like how Tolkien created a pantheon of archangels and turned them into lesser gods, a pantheon that mixed Greco mythology with Nordic mythology with Christian mythology. I enjoy that, and there's still a place for that. And D&D did really well at carrying that vision forward with like the Forgotten Realms. But yeah, my favorite thing in Dragon Age, you literally get to fuck a nun, a bisexual nun, and you can turn her into a stone cold hard militant person, and at the end of the day, you can be fucking the woman pope who's hot in charge of the medieval feminist version of their church, Catholic Church, which hell fucking yeah, giggity as hell. Or you can have sex with a witch and produce a demon spawn and bring the Antichrist into existence. Hot, once again, giggity. Um, Barefoot Witch. But yeah, these fantasy worlds are really dark, they're really introspective, and they create really good mythologies. I mean, I look at the new Rings of Power. I see Sauron as being the ultimate expression of Lucifer, okay? Sauron is the ultimate expression of Lucifer. He corrupts life. The orcs are corrupted life. You feel bad for them, and even Tolkien felt bad for the orcs. I mean, you also get Gladriel being a badass elven warrior queen killing orcs, which is awesome. And you see a deep world building. You see the Silmarillion transformed it for a modern day audience. Yes, I said that. Fanboys come at me. People like to bitch and moan about modern day fantasy watering down classical themes of good and evil. No, they don't. They make it more complex. But once again, when good exists, it stands out. Like whether it be Game of Thrones or Witcher or whatever, there's heroes who are not good or evil by the religious stance, but they're fighting for what's right and caring for the common man and fighting for the little guy in the midst of wars and empires and kingdoms and other gods. And with Rings of Power, I mean, Sauron is He's not evil mustache from villain. Yeah, he's an evil fuck. He's evil as fuck, but he thinks what he's doing is the right thing. And that's a complex issue we all got to talk about and really think about. And Sauron is just the ultimate expression of a dark elder Luciferian god who twists and controls everything. People sell their souls to him for power in a better world at the expense of their souls and their freedom, both in this world and the world to come. And I just find that to be the ultimate expression of Tolkien. It's evil is subtle. Dark fantasy really has shown their, especially Warhammer, has shown the fickle, sort of non-theistic nature of elder gods. I mean, the pagan gods were fucked. I mean, even if you read the Abrahamic religions, I mean, crusading god of extreme order, and once again, pagan religions are complex, but they're definitely not theistic the way I've seen with the more like monotheistic religions, where the god, at its best, actually cares about the suffering of the sick, the wounded, the child, the impoverished. Paganism just was about survival and making boons, improving your lot in life. And there's aspects of that I can't agree with. And we're seeing that in fantasy. We're seeing that in modern day fantasy shows. Like we're seeing the collapse of with the collapse of capitalism and the global innocence that we've gone through for the last 20 years. I completely get and agree with why dark fantasy is finding such a market nowadays. I really do. I mean, The Magicians is all built on flawed characters and flawed people who have all these magical abilities. They're bisexual twinks that fuck everything they see, and there's a polycule going on in the main characters. I'm not gonna lie, everyone's fucked someone in that show. And the point they're trying to make is humans are not perfect. You don't have to be a perfect to be a hero. I love Quentin because he's an autistic super nerd, D&D nerd, who finds out magic is real. And I'm totally like Quentin, by the way. At least I'm trying not to be like Quentin. What is my project right now? Where he's moralistic and he has this idea how the world should work, and it winds up leading to a lot of pain and a lot of hurt. Now that he discovers his magical powers and can cure the world and save the world from his own issues, he becomes disillusioned. And there's a lot of delusionment with the fantasy and whimsy of magic in magicians, which I think is really telling. Because at the end of the day, magic in the real world is just like spiritual science and metaphysical meditation to change your life and to get in contact with the divine and manifest the inward into the outward. Magicians does a really good job of that, and the more trauma you have, the more inner conflict, the more unstable your magic is going to be. And that's a good metaphor for life. And they really make magic out to be almost like a drug, and that's really true. As someone who's done the occult, it can become a drug, and for someone who's like neurodivergent, working with all these energies and powers can consume you, fuck you up. It can also lead to a world of whimsy and joy. I mean, the books literally end with Quentin creating a magical world for him and Alice to grow old in and have and fall in love in. And I'm like, okay, that's actually a really good ending for a book series. I can get down with that. I love the TV show, but the books are better. But I do really resonate with how Quentin is an autistic super nerd who has D&D powers and thinks he can save the world. I think that's really the magicians. The whole point of the show is they're flawed people with spiritual abilities, and what do you do with these spiritual abilities? It's almost like a role playing game. Honestly, another good game I would recommend is Mage the Ascension or Rule the Darkness. If you're really trying to get into neo paganism and get actual cult knowledge in a role playing game, World of Darkness, and the whole point of Mage the Ascension is everyone who is truly, you're so woke, you can bend reality. And reality doesn't exist anymore. Reality is subjective. That's the whole point of majors. They're that woke. And honestly, bending reality to fit the world you want to create. And there's all these different religions of magi, magicians, and orders and factions that want to make their version of reality true for everyone else. And I think that's a brilliant metaphor for modern day life. Magicians is a good show. Rings of Power, I really enjoy once again because it really delves into the Silmarillion and makes it palatable and like enjoyable for a modern day audience. You have a lot of like in Sauron, and they're not good. It still has the deep spirituality of Tolkien. I mean, once again, Sauron is literally a elder Luciferian god who thinks he's doing the right thing and is willing to manipulate, control, and hurt people to make the reality he wants come to life. But he thinks what he's doing is right. And there's that old saying, I know I'm right. Well, so does your enemy. And Tolkien did a really good job of that in saying you need higher ideals. You need objective truth to prevent people like Sauron from taking over the world. I agree with that. I just don't think Catholicism is the answer to that. Hot take for Catholics. And once again, reality is full of chaos. Reality is chaos. Human nature brings chaos in any institution. And fantasy really explores that. Mage the Ascension explores that. Tolkien has a very positive view of order. I have very negative views of order. But the character Sauron stands apart as the ultimate manifestation of unchecked ambition and unchecked sense of superiority and main character syndrome. Honestly, Sauron thinks he's doing what's right, and he will. All you need to do to live in the peaceful, perfect world and utopia he wants to create is sell your souls to him and worship him. And as a Christian, I really resonate with that energy. I think Rings of Power really brought that to the forefront more so than the Peter Jackson movies. Sauron literally appears as an angel of light and convinces the people of Middle Earth he's a god and he will bring them peace. And look what that leads to: war, death, and suffering. And then you get into like the rings of power, Wheel of Time, which is a magical metaphysical. It's like the Avatar meets Middle Earth. It's like Airbender meets Middle Earth. There's a dark god that is corrupting all the peoples of the earth, turning them into his minions, hunting down all those who don't worship him. And it's up to a group of mages and a chosen one to master their abilities to slay the dark, corrupting force that is destroying the world and destroying people's souls. There's all the factions fighting amongst themselves. There's the various white cloaks, the various forms of magi and factions. We're all just trying to survive this coming war that will destroy the world. And it's about infinite cycle of order and chaos and darkness and light. And I really resonate with that. And what modern day fantasy does really well is challenging black and white thinking that's often established by powers that be that serve their own nefarious purposes, whether that be the church, whether that be the empire, the noble courts, the armies, the orders who are fighting for their order, but they just enslave people. And then there's the absolute demonic chaos, which is to consume the world. And the heroes are the fellowship of nerdy weirdos who get together, who are weird and flawed, and they fight against the demonic forces of evil and they serve the spirit of good and light. That's how I see shows like Wheel Time. That's how I see shows like Rings of Power. It really resonates with me, and that's the story we all need to learn. Because obviously, the powers that exist have shown us they're not worth following. Whether that be the church, the state, or whatever. Put your faith in people and groups of people and community and not institutions. And think that's where we've gone through the dark emo phase of the 2010s and 2020s, and now we're focusing more on love and community and kindness. The nihilism is gone and the hope is returning. Not hope put into blind faith, but our fellow man, our fellow humans. And once again, another aspect I really like about dark fantasy the last decade is the really really actually occult accurate depiction of magic in like everything, even Rings of Power, The Witcher, um, magicians. Everything has a give and take, an alchemy sort of process and mentality that every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and that you need to sacrifice something to gain what you need, which is very telling about pagan magic, and they're really putting out a really good point of view. I mean, it even works out in religion. If you want to be rewarded by some religions, to be rewarded by God, you have to give money. You gotta serve the church. And I think modern day dark fantasy has shown us how corrupt institutions of power are, and it really just talks about the oppressive order of regimes like the Imperium of Man, and they really make you think what powers are worth reaching out to and how do I manifest the life I want to live? What am I willing to do to save the people I love and care about? And Magicians did a really good job of that. Witcher did a really good job of that. And once again, I think this has been a golden age of dark fantasy. I mean, the zeitgeist of fantasy media for the last decade or so has been the world's fucked, structures are fucked, order and chaos are forces that are tearing the world apart, and there's all these magical, whimsical creatures. I mean, low fantasy has become more popular than it's ever been. And by low fantasy, I'm not saying there's no magic. I enjoy low fantasy settings like Warhammer, where all the whimsy's been taken out, or if there is whimsy, it's a very twisted, dark whimsy. And Magicians took Narnia and they turned into a bestiality, fornication, dark, twisted version of Narnia, and I really enjoyed that. C.S. Lewis, as much as I respect the guy, I mean, I do like making fun of his work a lot. I respect his philosophy. I hate his fancy writing. We're living in a golden age of dark fantasy, and I've really enjoyed a lot of the shows that have been on the last 10 years because the heroes aren't perfect. There's no chosen one. Well, unless we're talking like the freaking Wheel of Time, but even then, it's like a cursed chosen one, and there's like dynamic the energy. There's the forces of light and the forces of darkness that are with each other, and the people in the middle are the ones who are trying to save the world. Who are not obedient to the church, or they're not slaves to the church, but they're fighting against the demonic forces trying to destroy the world. And I really resonate with that as someone who's like a standalone Christian mystic. And I've really enjoyed Warhammer Fantasy and how much it's really Warhammer Fantasy has had a huge impact on my own creativity, my own art, my own writing. So does Magicians. Dark fantasy or urban fantasy have really been great. We've seen a lot of great shows, like everything from Magicians, which is literally queer magical people in New York City who have all these magical powers. They're psychics, they're empaths, they're broken characters, and they're trying to do better and try and make up for past mistakes. I'll take that any day of the week over the chosen one mentality of Tolkien. As much as I love Lucas, the chosen thing is one thing has just become too tainted, in my opinion, by years and years of oversaturation. And even the gods and magicians and magicians are just assholes. They're assholes who care nothing about the lower fate planes of existence. And I've enjoyed that critique, and I've really enjoyed how pagan gods are being displayed as uncaring beings beyond our comprehension. Same thing that goes with the Aedra and the Daedra. I mean, I love ESO because every year I'm fighting against some new demonic invasion of the world of Tamriel. I'm going on quests, I'm killing demonic gods, I'm fighting off demonic hordes. I'm going on all these weird fantasy queer quests. I love ESO. I love Dragon Age. I love a lot of the good fantasy games that come out in the last couple of years. Dark Souls, Elden Ring. I love the decay of Elden Ring and Dark Souls and the Gothic horror it encourages with its demons, its elder gods. Bloodborne's a great game. I really like the cosmic horror. And then there's like Witcher, which is like these supernatural beings. Science is just magic we don't understand yet. Magic is a science we don't understand yet. I've really gotten into Conan, and that's a great game too. Because once again, I've really gotten tired of the Tolkien fantasy tropes and like light versus like good guys versus evil, black and white thinking. And as much as I love the overarching message of the Silmarillion, no matter how dark the forces of the demonic hells get, they come a hair's breadth from victory. And then the higher power, God, Iluvatar, the Maker, steps in, and through the actions of the outcast, saves the world and brings about age of peace and hope. I really resonate with that kind of storytelling. I do, as a person of faith. But I'd like to see modern day fantasy, and a lot of modern day fantasy does this, like Dragon Age. It's not the church that saves the world; it's the heretics and outcasts who have faith in the same God, but they're not bound by the laws and dogma and politics of the world around them. And that's another thing about Dragon Age. Encourages you to be a person of faith, but also you're living by your own moral code and not bound by the opinions of others. You make the societal changes. Do you uphold the status quo, or do you save all the oppressed groups like the elves, the mages, and give them equality, give them like create a better world, or do you establish the status quo, or do you create your own empire of conformity around you? I mean, Dragon Age Origins, you can literally rule a dark, fucked up kingdom at the end of it, rule in a kingdom full of werewolves, undead, demonic sorcerers, or you can live in a kingdom that's erased all racial boundaries and people are living in equality. That's the most edgelord thing I've seen in a game in years, and I love it. I mean, I also love the obsession with elder gods of crafting horror. We're really seeing in a lot of fantasy shows. Witcher has it, Dragon Age has it. These dark gods that are beyond our comprehension, and we are but mere flies and bugs in their presence. I love Lovecraft. I really recommend people get into it. I enjoy Lovecraft Country, and there's a fantasy thing worth getting into for everyone here. It's Conan. Get into Robert E. Howard. That guy was talented. And I guess one of the two topics I want to close today's podcast with is two things. One, modern day fantasy is not watered down. It's complicated. There's a lot more gray. There's still black and white, but often the black can come from the evil king, the evil pope. The white can come from the heretic, the outcast, the LGBT. Things are not been watered down. We still have concepts of good and evil. We're seeing that they're in different places than we've historically often associated them with. We are seeing the complexity of people and refugees and people who are suffering under persecution in these fantasy worlds, which is a reference to the real world. And the whole point of modern day fantasy is to offer us hope in a dark, bleak world where there seems to be no hope or love left. You make that hope and love. You find people, you meet them where they're at, and you change them for the better. That's a common theme in a lot of video games, role playing games, TV shows, and I really resonate with that message. Be the hope and light in a world full of chaos, demons, dragons, and elder gods. And that's a great message for the world we live in. I guess the second thing is when it comes to the Silmarillion, when it comes to the Rings of Power, folks, I've read the Silmarillion several times. I've read a lot of Tolkien's work. I'm a huge Tolkien scholar. It's actually pretty accurate to his writings and the overall message, the spiritual philosophy he created is more in the show than was in the Peter Jackson movies. Hot take. There's more gods and divinity and metaphysics and magic in the TV show than there is in the movies. And there's a lot of deep conversations about spirituality and metaphysics and what is right and what is wrong than I've seen in a lot of shows. Rings of Power is great. I guess in closing, another thing I want to say is get into these fantasy shows. They're great. And don't let a bunch of like culture warrior, puritanical Jesus freaks online tell you you're watching woke SJW TV shows. There's shows like that. I will mock them, but none of the shows I've listened to this on this list fall into that category. A lot of Jesus freak Republicans hate women of color being heroes. They hate LGBT people not being seen as freaks. And honestly, I love how inclusive modern day fantasy and storytelling has become. I think we're living in a golden age of modern day monomyths, and we have the hero's journey more than it has ever been seen in new ways and new forms, and it's worth indulging in and enjoying. I really do say that. And I guess the other point I want to make before I go is the fantasy genre I identify with is the post Tolkien D&D worlds of Driz, the Dark Elf, or the I just love the D&D Fellowship and the Quest and the Dragonlance books. Those are morally complicated, but they're still a fellowship of heroes who get together and they save the world. And then there's games like Dragon Age and Baldur's Gate, where it's a bunch of misfits and weirdos who wind up saving the world, and you can turn them into worse anti-hero edgelords, or you can teach them to be kind and loving and help them deal with their trauma and heal them and make them better. And that is what we need both in gaming and in the real world. I hope that resonates with you folks. Till next time, God bless, stay sane, and fuck Disney.